Okay, so we live in a world where pretty much anyone can create content, right? But how do you actually make someone, well, care? We're going to break down the key ideas from the book, The Storytelling Edge, and really get into the one skill that might be our last true advantage over AI. This quote just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? It perfectly sums up the problem we're all dealing with. We're getting blasted with data, posts, and ads 24/7, but finding real, genuine understanding, that's getting harder and harder to come by. So, what's the actual cause of this massive information overload? Well, the book gives it a name, and it's not a very flattering one. They call it the content sludge. Just think about your own social media feeds for a second. The sludge is all that generic, totally forgettable stuff that just gets in your way without giving you anything of value. It's the reason why brands are yelling louder than ever, but somehow being heard less and less. They're just contributing to the noise. All right, so how do we possibly cut through all this sludge? Well, the answer isn't some new marketing hack or fancier algorithm. It's actually wired directly into our brains. The solution, it turns out, is biological. And this is where it gets really fascinating. Look at the difference here. On the left, when you hear facts, it activates the language centers in your brain. You're basically just decoding information. But on the right, stories light up your whole sensory cortex. You don't just hear a story. Your brain makes you experience it. And here's the real magic happening under the hood. There's this thing called neural coupling, where the listener's brain literally starts to sync up with the storytellers. On top of that, stories release oxytocin, the empathy chemical. You can't just logic someone into trusting you, but a good story, it can trigger a chemical reaction in their brain that builds that bond naturally. It's incredible. Okay, so we know why stories work on a biological level. But how do you actually build one that forges that connection? Well, the book lays out a really simple but super powerful framework with 4 key ingredients. And here they are. These are the 4 pillars of a truly great story: relatability, novelty, fluency, and tension. The authors argue that if you get these 4 things right, you create a narrative that is almost impossible to ignore. So let's quickly break each one down. First up, relatability. The idea here is really straightforward. Your audience has to see a piece of themselves or their own values reflected in what you're saying. Without that first spark of, hey, that's kind of like me, empathy never even gets a chance to form. The connection is dead on arrival. Next, we need novelty. You see, our brains are basically prediction machines, and they're always filtering out stuff that they expect to see. To actually grab someone's attention, your story needs to violate those expectations. It needs that little twist, that surprising detail that breaks the pattern and makes people go, wait, what? Third is fluency. This one is so important. It's all about making your story easy to understand. If your audience has to work hard to figure out what you're saying, they're just going to tune out. The goal is simplicity. The book actually suggests aiming for a grade 7 reading level, because when something is easy to process, the message lands with way more impact. And finally, we have tension. You could argue this is the most critical part. It's the engine of the story. It's that gap between what is and what could be, that conflict, that unanswered question. That's what creates the curiosity that literally pulls your audience through to the very end. Without tension, you don't really have a story. You've just got a statement. So, now that we have all the elements, there's one more piece to the puzzle. It's a huge strategic mistake that so many brands and, frankly, so many people make. They completely misunderstand what their role is supposed to be in the story they're telling. So many companies try to be Luke Skywalker. They want to be the hero of the story. That is the wrong approach. Your customer is the hero. They are the one facing a challenge. Your job is to be Yoda, the wise mentor who shows up with the tool, the plan, or the insight they need to win the day. When you shift that perspective, you change everything. Okay, so all of this brings us to a really critical modern-day question. With automation and AI just exploding, does this very human skill of storytelling even have an edge anymore? I mean, this is the big question, right? This book came out before the whole AI revolution we're seeing now. With machines that can just churn out endless amounts of content, does this human skill even matter? And the answer is a huge, resounding yes. In fact, it matters more than ever before. AI is basically industrializing mediocrity. It's creating an even bigger tidal wave of that sludge we talked about. In this new world, a real, genuine, human story isn't just a marketing tactic, it's a survival kit. It's the one thing that can't be perfectly faked. And the authors leave us with this really powerful metaphor. They say a great story is like a wormhole. It just bypasses all the logical arguments, all the skepticism, all the apathy, and creates an instant, direct connection between a person and an idea. So I think the key takeaway here is pretty clear. As technology gets more and more advanced, our most powerful tool is still our most ancient one. In the fight for attention, for trust, for connection, the ultimate advantage isn't going to be a better algorithm. It's going to be a better story.